This is topic 7, lesson 5, dividing a whole number by a decimal. So in this case, um, how do you divide a whole number by a decimal? So in this case, we're going to do kind of like, I don't know, say the opposite, but whereas before we did a decimal by a whole number, that was yesterday's or 7-4's uh, 7-4's topic. Today we're going to go the opposite, and we're going to do a whole number by a decimal. This is a little bit more complicated. This isn't quite as simple as what we did in the last lesson. There's an extra step in doing this. So this is 426 divided by 6/10. So if we do this out, first of all, I'm going to think of this as I'm going to estimate first. And if I do this, if I estimate, I'm going to change that to 5/10, and I'm just going to change this to 400 because I can do that easily. I can easily double that because 400 divided by into 5/10 would be 800. So I'm going to have something close to 800. To do this though, you have to do an extra step because if we did this problem, if we wrote this problem out, it would look like this. All right? Because this is 426 divided by 6. Well, that's kind of a problem because we can't divide a decimal into a whole number. So what can we do to do that, to get rid of that decimal? Remember, when you have a problem like this, you can always multiply, or I suppose divide, both numbers by the same thing, and you will still get a accurate quotient. So what I mean by that is we can multiply both the divisor and the dividend by the same number and make it into something that is actually something we can do. So what we want to do is we want to turn this divisor into a whole number. So what can I multiply 6/10 by to make it into a whole number? A whole number would be like 6, right? So if I take 6/10 and I multiply that by 10, I would get 6, right? Well, I can't, and if I have 6 as a divisor, that's easy. I can easily divide a number that is 6. The thing is, I can't just leave 426 the way it is. I also have to multiply that by 10. And I would get 4,260. So it would become 6. It would become 424,260 divided by 6. And 6 goes into 42 7 times. So I'm going to bring down the 6. 6 goes into 6 one time. 0. And 710. And sure enough, 710 is pretty close to 800. And if we took 710 multiplied by 6, we would get 4,260. So just to look at that a little easier way than, or maybe a quicker way of looking at it. Let me just erase this. We could also think of this way. This is essentially what you're doing. Here, I'm going to take out my fancy dotted line. I like my dotted line. Okay. So what you're going to do is, I know I have to move this one place to make that into 6. So I'm going to have to move this decimal place one place. So since I moved one place there, I'm going to move one place there. So I'm multiplying this by 10, so I'm going to multiply that by 10. Because I can multiply, if I multiply the divisor by 10 and I multiply the dividend by 10, I'm still going to get the same number. I'm going to get the quotient's going to be the same. But that way we turn this divisor into a whole number, and we know how to divide by whole numbers. So we've been doing that for several years now. So that's all you do, is you just take and you move this decimal place however many places. So if this has been, so let's say this had been 426 divided by 6700s, okay, we would have, now we're moving this over 1, 2 places, so I have to move this over 1, 2 places, extend my line there. I'd have to add 2 zeros there. Okay? So whatever you multiply this number by, whatever factor of 10 you multiply this by the same thing. So in this case, I multiplied it by 10. In this case, I multiplied it by 100. So since I multiplied this by 10, I multiplied this by 10. If I multiplied this by 100, I multiplied this by 100. If this were a 3-digit decimal, I'd multiply, and I had to move this over 3 places, I'd move this one over 3 places. That's how you do it. It's so that there's just this extra little step so that you're not dividing by a decimal. Okay, why don't you give it a try with 720 divided by 1 and 2/10? Okay, how do we do? So I'm going to set this up like this, 720. And I encourage you also always to write these right to left. I think that's easier if you're always kind of thinking 720 divided by 1 and 2/10, 720 divided by 1 and 2/10, as opposed to what I just did on the other page and I wrote in the other direction. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my little dotted pen. I have to move this over one place, so I'm going to move this over one place. I multiplied this by 10, so I'm going to multiply this by 10. And that's my new number. 12 goes into 72. 6 times. It's early yet. It's 7:08 in the morning. So 6 times 12 is 72. 0, 0. And then I'm going to keep putting zeros in here. Remember, this is the only tricky thing with these things. Remember, you have to have a number over every number in the dividend. So there's a 6 here, there's a 0 here, there's a 0 here. So in other words, if I'd done this, think of this one's an easy one to estimate, right? I should have started out with my estimate. I'm just going to change that into a 1. So what's 720 divided by 1? 720. So 600 is close to 720. So I am all set. So if I had stopped at 6 and I'd forgotten to put these zeros in, or if I stopped at 60 and forgot to put the 0 in, and then if I'd done my estimate here at 720, I would know I was wrong. So that is how you do this. Thank you for listening, and good luck.